Now, as we move into the next chapter, chapter 6, we're going to start talking about outcome versus intent. And that's really the bottom line here. We're going to see the costs and benefits of price controls, government attempts to make things better in the market. Now, sometimes, let's face it, the market equilibrium isn't what we wish it could be. We want it to be lower if it's the price of something we buy, and we want it to be higher if it's the price of something we sell, including our own labor services. All we can say about equilibrium is that it's efficient. It may not be what we were hoping for. And so what we do is we call upon our representatives in Washington to fix it. Make that price lower or make our wages higher. You know, something. It's got to be, we got to make it better. Now, I don't think there's a bigger head-on collision, a bigger mess, a bigger wreck, okay, than when good economics plows into good politics. Politicians are always promising to fix things and make them better. And that is their intent. See, I really believe that. They intend to do better, to make things better. The question is, can they? Do they have the power to do that? And as we will see, often they do not. And so, yes, we have lots of good intentions out there. But in economics, we judge things by their outcomes, not their intent. In politics, excuse me, we still love our politicians if they have a good heart and they intended to do good things, right? They were trying to do good for us. Oh, well, didn't work out, but you know, he's such a great guy. We love him anyway, right? In economics, we couldn't care less about intent. All we care about is outcome. Yeah, the dismal science, right? Yeah, I know, people have good hearts and all that, but intent doesn't get us very far. In economics, it's all about outcome. So what we're going to look at now, or in the beginning of this chapter, are price controls and the costs and the benefits of price controls. And we're going to start out, well, let's just review. Basic supply and demand. Here we go. Supply, demand. Here's our equilibrium. And we talked about this stuff earlier. At this price here, the market clears. Here's the equilibrium quantity. Quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. There's no shortages. There's no surpluses. Everything is flowing along. Well, let's say you don't like that price. And you lobby Washington, and they're going to raise it. Okay? If they're raising it, you must be a seller of this good. Well, let's start out with wages. Here's supply. And instead of price, we're going to put a W for wages. And specifically, we're going to call this the market for unskilled labor. So we're talking people who, when I say unskilled, I don't mean any disrespect. But these are people without surgical skills. If you were to go to them, they don't know how to do surgery on you. They don't know how to prepare your taxes. They don't know how to, take your case to court. Okay, they don't know how to do any of those things that are valued by the labor market. They don't know how to, manufacture things. That's what I mean by unskilled. Unskilled or low skilled. And I'm just talking about skills that are marketable. Okay, you may know everything in the world about making baskets. Maybe. Let's just pick one. In fact, have a, excuse me, a great deal of knowledge. But if it isn't valued by the market, we're going to just lump that together and call unskilled. Unskilled labor as per the what is valued in labor markets. So when we find work to do, a career, we have to kind of trade off maybe things that we're really interested in, and along with things that that are there's a demand for. Okay, so that's always it's always an issue. I mean, you there has to be a demand for it to make a living, but so not everything you're interested in is going to be a moneymaker for you. So, okay. So here's the supply of labor. Let's say if the wage is $1 an hour, how many people would be interested in working? Okay, not very many. Let's just put in a number to have a number. On the other hand, if wages were $100 an hour, well, we'd have a whole bunch of people who weren't interested in working before are now interested in working. So the supply curve is upward sloping, just like we would expect for anything else. Okay? And the demand curve is downward sloping, as we would expect. At very low wages, let's say $1 an hour, lots and lots of employers want to hire you. Okay? $1 an hour, employers want to hire 100 people. $100 an hour, pretty darn close to zero, but maybe let's say 1. So we have a downward sloping curve for labor. So let's put these curves together. Supply, demand. Here's equilibrium. Let's say the equilibrium is, hold on here. Let's say 10. And let's say this is, be more specific, this is for burger flippers. Now, as a former burger flipper myself, I use that term with great affection. I was a burger flipper at Wendy's when I was a youngster. So, and you know what? I was an unskilled laborer because I knew how to flip burgers, I knew how to pour the drinks, I knew how to do the French fries, but let me tell you how long I was trained for that. How long was my burger flipping training? Probably about 4 minutes. I don't think it was longer than 4 minutes. Exactly how to flip it, how to cook it. Okay, you get the idea. My French fry training was, I think, could have been less than a minute. I mean, it was, pour the oil in here and hit this button, and when the light goes off, whatever. I mean, it was. So we're talking not literally unskilled. I had skills, but pouring the drinks and stuff, I'd already kind of learned that in my life, and so my drink pouring training was. I don't think I had drink training. I think I kind of already knew that. So it's either the training program was extremely short. I mean, I've had students who were. I never worked at Walmart, but I had a student who his job was to get the carts out of the parking lot at Walmart. His training program, I think, was only perhaps 30 or 40 seconds long. See those carts there? Bring them over here. Okay, that's about 10 seconds. Okay, so anyway, let's say this is Burger Flippers. So, and the market clearing wage is $10. Now, let me ask you something. And that means at $10 an hour. Well, let's go ahead and let's say there's 100. Just to pick a number, put it in there instead of just a P and a Q. There will be 100 people who want to work for that amount, and there will be 100 people who are hired at that wage. Now, I remember a few years ago, I don't go to McDonald's much anymore because I'm a few pounds more than I want to be. So I've learned to cut that stuff out, or at least cut it way down. But I remember back when I was a McDonald's guy, I remember going through the drive-up, and they'd have a sign that says hiring smiling faces for $10 an hour. I think it was $10 if I chose that amount here. Now, that was a few years ago. Probably several years ago. I can't remember when it was. But it was somewhere, anyway. But the minimum wage at that time was around $7 or maybe even $5.25. It was somewhere in there, $5, $6, $7 an hour. Now, I've always enjoyed asking students, and they're absolutely stumped. Why is McDonald's paying people $10 an hour when the law only requires them to pay $7 an hour? Why would they do that? Well, it could be that they're really, really, really nice guys. And that may be true. They're really nice guys, but that's not why they're paying $10 an hour. I guarantee it. Even though they're extremely nice, they're not going to pay 10 when they only have to pay you 7 or 6 or whatever. Why do they do it? It's called market competition for workers. The market, okay, here we are. Here's the market. Here's the supply. Here's the demand. Here's the equilibrium. They have to pay the equilibrium wage. They have to if they want to hire anybody. The thing is, McDonald's, they had to compete against Taco Bell, Burger King, Walmart, Pizza Hut. I mean, they have to compete for workers. And if the market says the equilibrium wage is $10 an hour, if they want to hire anybody, what if they advertise for 7? Who's going to work at McDonald's? Nobody. They're all going to go to Burger King or Taco Bell, right? So the market competition forced them to pay higher than the minimum wage. That's why they were paying 10 instead of 7. So, well, I got a little bit ahead of myself on that, but I want you to see this equilibrium is what reality is. And if you're trying to change reality, there's going to be some consequences. Maybe not. Let's start out. In fact, since I already talked about that, let's say that Congress imposes a $7 an hour minimum wage. by law, prices cannot go below this red line. Okay, that is called a price floor. And that's what a minimum wage is. It's a minimum, okay, minimum. Can't go below that. It's a floor. You can't go below this. So, here's our minimum wage. At this wage, here's quantity supplied. Here's quantity demanded. Well, we went through this earlier in the course. What happens when the wage or the price is below equilibrium? Market pressures are going to push this up. Okay, it's going to gradually move its way up to equilibrium. Because of the shortage. We have this shortage. Okay. Now let's pick a number. Let's say this is 90. Let's say this is 110. So that we have a shortage of 20. Quantity demanded that wage is 110. Only 90 people want to work, so we've got a shortage. So what are you going to do? You don't have enough workers. You're going to have to raise the wage to attract them to come and work. What wage is it going to have to be? Well, it's ultimately going to have to work its way up to the equilibrium wage of $10. And that is why McDonald's was hiring for $10. Now, since the price floor, minimum wage in this case, is below the equilibrium, there are no consequences. There are no negative effects. Why is that? Because the $7 is only a minimum. Well, the equilibrium wage is 10. So is imposing a minimum wage having any adverse effects? No, not at all. Let's say that Congress comes in and raises the minimum wage to $9 an hour. They've raised the wage to $9 an hour. And people are saying, watch out, raising the minimum wage will cause unemployment. Well, let's see. They raised the minimum wage from 7 to 9. Let's say that's 95. The quantity supplied is now 95. So you're going from 7 to 9. You got more people interested in working. And at the higher wage, firms aren't as interested in hiring quite as many. But there's still a shortage of 10 now. Okay? Ultimately, it's going to work its way up to $10. Okay, if the wage was ever 9. Okay, what I'm pointing out here is any changes in the minimum wage, as long as it's below equilibrium, anything down here, okay, isn't going to have any impact on the market. This is called a non-binding price floor. Non-binding. It just says, doesn't do anything. It's like it's not even there. Because, again, this is a minimum. The market wage, the market is forcing firms to pay $10 an hour. So anything going on below that doesn't even matter. Okay. Now, where things change is when the minimum is above equilibrium. Okay, let's take a look at that. Okay, a fresh demand and supply curve. And here we are with our market for burger flippers. Okay, now let's suppose that Congress now passes a law that says the minimum wage, ooh, I know, let's pick a random number like 15. We have now a price floor there. There's our minimum wage. Again, minimum wage is a price floor. By law, wages can't go below that point. Well, at $15 an hour, quantity demanded is here. Let's say 90. And quantity supplied is here. Let's say 110. Now, where's that quantity supplied coming from? Where's that increase in people wanting to work coming from? Well, you got homemakers at home saying, hey, let grandma tend the kids. I'm going to go out and make a few extra bucks. They weren't willing to do it at 10. 10 wasn't enough, but 15, You've got college students. Hey, at $10, I'm going to school part-time. Excuse me, full-time. I'm going full-time at 10. That's not enough. But if I can get 15, maybe I go part-time and make some extra bucks. See, some people are going to enter the market, and they're going to be filling out those job applications. So they've got a lot more people out there looking. But guess what? Because the wage is higher, firms are going to figure out ways to get by on fewer employees. A lot of technological advancement in this area, where you've got now, I know, speaking of McDonald's, they're putting in computers now to go in there and place your order by touching the screen, where a human being used to do that sort of thing. So they do respond. They do respond to this, and they will. The managers might work, or the owner, managers, whatever, may work more hours, that kind of thing. So, okay. So in this case, we have quantity supplied of 110, quantity demanded of 90. And what is it when we have quantity supplied exceed quantity demanded? We have a surplus. A surplus of 20. Okay. And in economics, we call a surplus of labor unemployment. So we've got 20 people looking for jobs who don't have them. So the unemployment rate goes up when the minimum wage goes up from 10 to 15. Now, who is hurt and who is helped here? Let's look at who's helped and who's hurt. Well, you've got 90 people still employed, right? And they used to make 10. Now they're making 15. They're thinking, hey, this minimum wage thing is great. But before, at the old equilibrium of 10, you had 100 people employed. So you've got 10 people who lost their jobs. The manager calls you in and says, sorry, we cannot keep you on the staff anymore. Now, what 10 are these? Okay, it goes from 100 down to 90. Those are the least productive workers on their staff. These are people that they hired who they thought could do $10 worth of production per hour, however they want to measure it, $10 worth of production, and it was worth it to them. The work they did was worth $10 an hour to the employer. So if you were picking strawberries, let's say, you were able to pick strawberries, $10 worth of strawberries per hour or more, okay? But you were able to pick at least 10. That kind of thing. So your productivity is there. So the hardest hit are the lowest producing employees. Who is the minimum wage most trying to help? Really, it's geared to help the least productive, but they're the first ones out the door when the wage goes above equilibrium. Okay. So that's who it's hurting. And then you've got these other 10 entering the market who weren't in before. They're not really being hurt. They're getting their hopes up maybe, like, hey, whoa. And you know what? Some of those are going to replace some of these that are lost. So you got people who aren't willing to work at 10. If they're really sharp and on the ball, the employers have a new pool of employees, potential employees to choose from. Okay, so that is what the minimum wage does if it's above equilibrium. Now, at least in the United States, in practice, politicians have never had the guts, frankly, to put the minimum wage above equilibrium because they know this is going to happen. Usually the minimum wage is below equilibrium. And when they raise it up to equilibrium or just below equilibrium. Why do they even bother? If it's below equilibrium, remember, it's non-binding. Doesn't do anything. It doesn't do any good. It doesn't do any bad. It doesn't do anything. I can only guess that, again, this is in a politician's mind. That way they get the credit. Okay? If they don't raise the minimum wage, everyone's going to be mad at them. And if they raise it, they can now take credit for that new wage. So let's say the wage is down here somewhere, and they raise it up to 10. Oh my goodness, we're helping we're helping workers. I'm the working man's politician. That kind of thing. But what did they do? They just raised the minimum wage up to what the market wage was anyway. Now in Europe, the politicians aren't so timid. They have high minimum wages, much higher than ours. And do they have unemployment rates much higher than ours? Oh, yeah. Yes, they do. France, Spain, their unemployment rates are typically double what ours is. And that's because they're not as shy about sticking minimum wages up here. Now, the debate right now is that over the $15 minimum wage, and the reason it's not passing is because too many people are concerned that this is the scenario right here, that we're going to have this. And that's the situation, that the minimum wage is indeed above equilibrium. And to have a nationwide wage like that is indeed fairly, well, it's fairly ridiculous, because New York City can certainly handle a high cost, high income areas can certainly have a higher minimum wage than, say, out in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Okay, you impose a $15 an hour minimum wage out there, and nobody's going to be working. So let's go to the extreme. Let's look at this. What if the minimum wage was $1,000 an hour? We'd all be rich, right? Let's just make it $1,000 an hour, and we're all rich. We all got mansions on the beach in Florida, and we all have boats, and we all have airplanes. if it were that easy. It's all smoke and mirrors here. It's smoke and mirrors, really. You can do it a little bit, and you can do it to buy votes, more or less, if you're a politician. But these are the economic consequences. There are pros and cons. Once we get up above equilibrium, there are pros and cons. There are winners and losers. And whether you're happy about it or not depends on if you're one of these 90 right here. Now, on the other hand, if you're somebody who has been making minimum wage for, let's say, 20 years, you've been working these jobs, okay, your problem is not the minimum wage. Your problem is that you have not spent any time investing in yourself to learn marketable skills. These jobs are designed for perhaps part-time work or extra work, but usually it's designed for high school, college kids working their way through school, whatever. Or a part-time job to supplement your income. They're not designed to be careers. And so, if you've been working at minimum wage jobs for 20, 30 years, and I know some people are, and they're frustrated, that's because nobody ever taught them that the way to get ahead is to learn marketable skills. And in the U.S., with all these opportunities at colleges like ours, and low cost to learn skills, learn marketable skills, it's a shame that they didn't take advantage of that. Well, okay, so let's go to the studies. We have politicians galore talking about studies that say that raising the minimum wage does not cause unemployment. And we have others saying studies do show that it causes unemployment. How can there be studies showing both? It's real easy. If you do a study where they raised the wage from, say, this point to this point, and let me draw it in. Let's say here's the minimum wage, and they raise it to here. What's going to happen? Nothing. Why? Because it's below equilibrium. Anything to be below equilibrium doesn't do anything. So raising it that far, yes, it was an increase in minimum wage, but it doesn't do anything. It's a non-binding price floor. Now, if you raise it up in here, up in this area, okay, yes, it will cause unemployment. So that's where you get all the disagreement about that. Are you below the equilibrium and raise it to a point where you're still below equilibrium, which is often the point in the U.S. Because politicians have never had the guts to put it above equilibrium. And again, that's where $15 didn't make it, because they don't dare, because they know it's above equilibrium right now, and they don't want to cause unemployment, especially when unemployment's high coming out of a recession due to this pandemic. Well, another reason why you can get differences depends on if it's long-term or short-term. Let's say you do a very short-term study. Let's say these are the supply and demand curves. Quite inelastic, right? That's a fairly inelastic demand curve, fairly inelastic supply curve, and here's equilibrium. And if you raise the minimum wage, let's say the minimum wage is right at equilibrium and you raise it above equilibrium, you're going to have a very small change. Here's the change. The unemployment, we got quantity supplied exceeding quantity demanded, but not by very much. So you can definitely state in your study that covered just a short period of time that there's a very small change in unemployment. Yeah, there's an unemployment issue there, but it's very, very small. We don't have to worry about it. Well, but what happens to elasticity over time? Okay, think back to the chapter on elasticity. Over time, this demand curve will get more elastic. This supply curve will get more elastic. Okay? Now, where are we? We have a bigger change. Quantity supplied here, quantity demanded here. Over time, things become more elastic. You're going to have more entrants in the job market. You're going to have firms figuring out ways to get around the higher wage. Okay, so longer-term studies indicate there is a stronger unemployment effect. So, okay, that's minimum wage.